The flight attendant's smile vanished the moment she saw him. His first-class ticket was valid, his suit was impeccable, but in her eyes, none of that mattered. She saw a man who didn't belong. With a dismissive gesture, she pointed him towards the back of the plane, completely unaware that she had just made the biggest mistake of her career. She had no idea that in the next 36 minutes, the man she just humiliated would decide her entire future. What power was she about to confront? Marcus Thorne wasn't just a CEO, he was the architect of his own destiny, a man who had built an empire from sheer will and brilliance. Today he was flying home after closing a deal that would redefine his company for decades to come. Exhausted but satisfied, he moved through the airport with a quiet confidence. The chaos of the terminal faded away as he entered the serene bubble of the first-class lounge, a world he had earned his place in. His journey to the gate was seamless. He was just another passenger, another suit in a sea of travelers. But as he approached the boarding line, he noticed the flight attendant at the counter. She greeted the passengers ahead of him with a practiced, polished warmth. Marcus stepped forward, his boarding pass in hand, expecting the same routine smile. Instead, her eyes met his, and for a fraction of a second, the professional mask slipped. A flicker of something cold and appraising replaced it. He didn't know it yet, but this woman was about to challenge everything he had worked for. "Your seat is 18B, the flight attendant said, her voice clipped and sterile. She didn't even look at his ticket. Marcus held up his boarding pass, the bold 1A clearly visible. "There must be a mistake," he replied, calmly, his voice even. "My seat is in first class." The woman finally glanced at his ticket, but her expression didn't change. It was a look of disbelief, as if the paper itself was a lie. She snatched it from him in his hand, her eyes scanning it not for information, but for a flaw. "This can't be right," she muttered, just loud enough for him to hear. She called over a male colleague, whispering and gesturing towards Marcus. The new attendant approached, his posture immediately defensive. He didn't ask for an explanation. He delivered a verdict. "Sir, we're going to have to ask you to step aside. There's been an error with your ticket." Marcus stood his ground, the injustice of the situation coiling in his stomach like a serpent. He explained he had booked the ticket months ago, that he was a frequent flyer with the airline, but his words were met with deaf ears. He watched as other first-class passengers boarded, shuffling past him with averted eyes. Some shot him looks of pity, others of suspicion, as if his very presence was a disruption. The crew's whispers grew louder, their stares more pointed. They were creating a scene, painting him as the problem. The head flight attendant finally came over, not to resolve the issue but to end it. "Sir," she said, her voice dripping with false authority, "if you don't move to your assigned seat in economy, we will have you removed from this aircraft." The threat hung in the air, thick and suffocating. They weren't just denying him his seat, they were publicly humiliating him, stripping him of his dignity in front of a plane full of strangers. He was no longer a CEO, no longer a valued customer. In their eyes, he was just a man who didn't know his place. Marcus looked at the three crew members standing before him like a tribunal. He gave a slow, deliberate nod, his face an unreadable mask. He turned away from the first-class cabin and walked towards the back of the plane. But he didn't head to seat 18B. Instead, he quietly pulled out his phone and made a single, crucial call. The crew thought they had won. They had no idea the battle had just begun. The cabin doors were sealed, but the plane wasn't moving. A tense silence fell over the passengers. The crew, fresh off their perceived victory, exchanged nervous glances. Then the cockpit door swung open. The captain emerged, his face grim, and in his hand was a printed email. He didn't use the intercom. He walked directly to the head flight attendant who had threatened Marcus. "What is the meaning of this?" he demanded, holding up the printout. "I just received a priority message from our corporate office." He paused, his eyes sweeping over the 3 crew members who had confronted Marcus. "It seems we've made a grave error. The passenger you moved from 1A, Marcus Thorne, is not just a frequent flyer. He is the CEO and founder of Thorne Industries, the very company that finalized its acquisition of a controlling stake in this airline. This morning." The color drained from the head attendant's face. The air went still. Her forced smile melted into a mask of pure horror as the weight of her actions crashed down on her. She had not just insulted a passenger, she had humiliated her new boss. The captain's voice dropped even lower, becoming a blade. "The delay we are experiencing is because Mr. Thorne is currently deciding the fate of this flight crew, and I've just received his decision." He looked past them, down the aisle, to where Marcus sat in quiet composure. The entire plane seemed to hold its breath. The captain's words settled over the cabin like a shroud. The 3 crew members stood frozen, their authority stripped away in a single devastating moment. They were quietly escorted off the aircraft before it ever left the gate, their careers vaporized by 36 minutes of sheer prejudice. Marcus was then shown to his rightful seat, 1A. There was no triumphant smirk, no gloating. As he settled into the plush leather, the quiet hum of the engines felt heavy, almost mournful. The satisfaction he thought he would feel never came. In its place was a profound sadness. He had been forced to wield an unimaginable level of power, not to gain an advantage, but simply to be treated with basic human dignity. His title, his wealth, his influence, these had been his only shield against a form of hatred so casual that it had become routine. He had won, but the victory felt hollow. This was never a story about a CEO getting revenge. It was a story that exposed a deeply uncomfortable truth. Justice in this instance was only possible because of immense power. It begs the question, what happens to the people who look like Marcus but don't have a corporate empire at their back? They are dismissed, humiliated, and told to sit in the back of the plane, and they have no one to call. Their stories are never heard. So if it takes owning the airline to get the respect you paid for, what does justice look like for everyone else?